Good morning. My name is Jonathan Jordan here at First Baptist Church Douglas. We're glad that you've joined us this morning for Sunday school. This morning we start a whole new quarter in our Sunday school. If you've got your book, we still have books available here at the church. We've had lots of folks come by. Sunday school teachers are delivering them, and we've had folks come by and get them. If you still need a book, you're welcome to come by the church, and we can have a book for you. But we are starting a whole new section. We're in Isaiah. We spent some time in Proverbs kind of through the summer, and I'll tell you the study for this fall for Isaiah, it's outstanding. Isaiah is a great book. I'm going to give you a little bit of historical background, and we'll do a little bit of an abbreviated lesson this morning. We've got lots of things going on here at First Baptist Church Douglas, and I want to make sure that you kind of know the dates and times and the places that you need to know as we re-engage and we get into phase 2. We're going to begin our preschool and our children and our students and those things and get those rolling. And I'll give you the dates and the times for those at the conclusion of this lesson. But let me just go ahead and we'll do an abbreviated lesson this morning. I encourage you to continue to read. Isaiah is an outstanding book and lots of great stuff in there. And we see God moving and working with his people. And but let me go ahead and get started. And then we'll talk about some things coming for the First Baptist Church of Douglas that you need to be a part of. Isaiah is really separated in about 3 different sections. 1 through 35, we see Assyria is kind of the major world power going on at that time, and really is kind of threatening Judah at this point. Chapters 36 through 39, we get the historical connection as kind of the bridge of the 2 major sections, and then starting in 40, we get Hezekiah's openness to the Babylonian delegation, which really sets the stage for the 70 years in exile for God's people, and then forgiveness and restoration, and kind of goes through that. This morning, we are in really kind of jumping right here. We're in Isaiah, the first chapter, starting in verse 10. And the neat thing here is we hear and we see God kind of speaking through the prophet Isaiah. It says here, and I'm in verse 10. It says, "Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Listen to the instruction of our God, you people of Gomorrah." Let me go ahead and stop right there and help you understand that this is Isaiah speaking. We'll see at the end, he'll say kind of, "Thus saith the Lord," or whatever, letting everyone know that it's God's words and not his. But let me set this in context for you. When he refers to them, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, okay, that's not like a mystery. They know what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. These people are very well aware of what happened in our context back in Genesis. They didn't have that, but back in Genesis, they know that fire came down from the sky and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So when Isaiah begins to speak in verse 10 and says, "Hear the word from the Lord," okay, you rulers of Sodom, listen to the instruction of God, you people of Gomorrah, that's the attention getter. They are going to listen because they're well aware of what happened. "What are your sacrifices to me?" asked the Lord. "I have had enough of burnt offerings and rams and the fat of well-fed cattle. I have no desire for the blood of bulls, lambs, and male goats." God is really kind of chastising them. It's through Isaiah, but he's really kind of chastising them here. And you may say, "Well, I thought God kind of set up this sacrificial system. Isn't that what he wanted?" I mean, he kind of told the people of Israel, "This is, you make these sacrifices to, et cetera, so on." But here's what was happening. The relationship with God was kind of changing. Rather than the people of Judah loving God and bringing sacrifices and offer to show him their love, the people were engaging in empty rituals, or worse, viewing their offerings as kind of a means to an end. There were other religions going on at this time in other parts of the world, and what it was kind of, they were kind of going through the rote. They were kind of going through, we're going to give you these because we know that we want God's blessing, and this is what you wanted. It's kind of like people telling you what you want to hear, but you're like, no, tell me the truth. And they're like, oh no, this is what you want to hear. And so they're giving God kind of what he asked for, But here's the big difference, and here's what was going on, and they picked this up for some other religions going on at the time. There was no heart. There was no motivation. There was nothing in their heart that said, we love God so much, this is what we want to do. What they had kind of done is kind of contrived this formula of, if we give God this, then he gives us the blessing, which is what we want, and we can kind of go on our merry way. And I'll have to tell you, and of course we've talked about this before, being online is a little different, but if I had a classroom full of people, which I don't, I tell you, that's where I would begin to ask some questions in my class about how many times we come to worship, we come to church, we come to this room in here, and we go through kind of the ritual, hoping to glean God's blessings for us. If we give a little money to God, we come to worship service, we check 4 or 5 boxes that we've been kind of told through the years to receive God's blessing. And this is what he is just chastising them about. He said they were engaging in rituals and just to get what they wanted. Verse 11, he says, I've had enough of burnt offerings and rams. I have no desire for the blood of bulls. So he's basically saying, I'm out. You need to stop this. Verse 12, it says, when you come to appear before me, who requires this from you, this trampling of my court, stop bringing useless offerings. Your incense are detestable to me. New moons, Sabbaths, and calling of solemn assemblies. I cannot stand iniquity with a festival. I hate your new moons and prescribed festivals. They have become a burden to me. I am tired of putting up with them. Wow. I mean, God is he's just laying it down for them, starting in verse 10 through Isaiah, and he has just had enough. At this point, with God starting out with the Sodom and Gomorrah reference and kind of running through what we've read already, that would have my attention and hopefully yours. When he talks about trampling through the courts, he talks about the quality of the gifts wasn't the question. They had fatted these bulls and calves up to a ripe old plump size and hoping that was going to increase their blessing. But it says the people were to obey and love God. Going through the motions was not enough. Repetitive sacrificial activity, which was the trampling without loving God, was just an empty affair. So basically, he puts the brakes on it and says, all that you're doing, that you keep doing this over and over to get these blessings, it's just an empty affair. Just stop. Just quit it. This would be akin to growing up. My mother had a great saying. It's when she was sick and tired of whatever we were doing. God's had it up to here. He's done with it. And he's kind of cutting them off at the quick. Saying, don't do it. He said, I hate your new moons, your festivals. And he used the word prescribed. And that's that formula I'm talking about. It talks about how they've kind of done this on their own accord and they get the right formula. And see, if they didn't get the blessing or the blessing they wanted, then, well, maybe we need to put one more goat in there. Or maybe that cow wasn't enough and it needs to be. So they're searching for this formula of goats and cows and perfect animals and these kinds of things to get the right blessing. And if they didn't feel like they got the blessing from God, then they would change part of it. They would change part of it to make sure that they got the blessing from God. And that's kind of the game they're playing. It's like, you just tell me what you want, we'll give it to you, and you bless us, and we're all good. Well, there's a fundamental problem with that when we start dealing with God in those terms. We'll get to it in here in just a second. But I will tell you there is an absolute fundamental problem. We see it in the Old Testament. It's absolutely put on display in the New Testament. But we'll move ahead kind of as we go through this. Verse 15, when you spread out your hands in prayer, I will refuse to look at you, even when you offer countless prayers. I will not listen. Your hands are covered with blood. Basically what he's talking about is people come to worship, they're holding up their hands, and they literally have blood-stained hands because of the violence that they have taken on with each other. This is a violent time. We We have violence on our TV now, and we've seen kind of an uptick in that in the past few months, which has disturbed many of us. But this is the kind of violence. They were covered with blood. It represents a violence towards each other and towards the innocent. Again, the reference is back to Sodom and Gomorrah. And I think many ways we have to look to see when we come to God, in what shape are we in? Or we come with a repentant heart, or we come with a heart that wants to be cleansed and clean, or here I've done all this stuff, I've got blood on my hands, but here I'm going through the motions anyway, bless me. And he's talking about the violence there. In verse 17, he tells them, wash yourselves, cleanse yourselves, remove your evil deeds from my sight. Stop doing evil. Learn to do what is good, pursue justice, correct the oppressor, defend the rights of the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. This kind of goes back to the widows and the orphans and taking care of them. And he was basically letting them know. Verse 16 gives them 4 commands: wash, cleanse, remove, and stop. Stop what you're doing. Stop doing evil. Remove the evil. Stop doing the evil deeds. And then he says, learn, pursue, correct, defend. He wants them to pursue the things of justice, pursue the things of God, not these other things. No matter, we want your actions to replicate what you were doing in worship. We've got all these bad things you're doing back here in your life, but you're coming to worship, and you're giving God these animals and saying, hey, bless me, forgive me, or whatever, with no mind what you've been doing back here. And God he sees those things too. It's kind of like the funny, one of the funniest things around is nobody's looking. Well, God's always looking. And I think sometimes as believers especially, we forget that. We have to understand that if you're a believer, that God is always watching us. And not only what we do on the outside, our actions and those things, but he also has a clear view to the heart. And that's what he's letting them know in so many words. Verse 18, he said, let's come settle this. Okay, so now that he's kind of waylaid into him, leaned into him a little bit, verse 18, he said, let's settle this, says the Lord. Through the sins they are scarlet, they will be white as snow. They are crimson red, but they will be like wool. If you're willing and obedient to eat the good things of the land. Verse 20, let's hold on to 20. So Isaiah, he's letting them know that they can avoid this whole fate of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they have a chance to repent. God is tired of their lack of obedience, but here's what he wants. He said there are 2 major issues that Isaiah presented to God's people: their lack of obedience, and then he connected them back to their awareness of who God is and what he desires. And what he desires, first of all, who God is, Yahweh in their sense, and then what he desires is a relationship. Not an exchange for goods and services. You give me these animals and I'll give you blessing. Obviously, we see the ultimate sacrifice and the ultimate plead for relationship to everyone through his Son in the New Testament. But we already see God extending his hand, wanting relationship, wanting people to be obedient and love him for who he is and not for some exchange of blessing. And I think sometimes people get that confused. There's a relationship there. There's a heart issue there that God understands who we are, not just on the outside, but who we are on the inside. And when we come forward with our offering of worship, that it's actually authentic and it's true and it's uninhibited by it doesn't have other motivation behind it. Now, verse 20, he kind of comes back around. But if you refuse and rebel, you will be devoured by the sword, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. There's not a whole lot of interpretation or teaching about verse 20, except for these are your options. It starts with 18, but God pleads with us to be with him. And like I said, with a repentant heart, he can take the crimson red, he can take those scarlet and make them white as snow. He can make them as wool. and forgiveness is available. And like I said, this kind of pushes forward, and I know we're not in the New Testament, but this kind of pushes forward to God's offering of his Son of relationship and forgiveness of sin that we see in the New Testament. But again, this is probably 700 years, 650, 700 years prior to Christ even being born. So, but you see God already kind of laying his plan, and his relationship with the people of Israel continues. So relying on religious rituals always falls short when we approach a holy God. I tell you, I'm looking forward to Isaiah. It is a strong book, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it this fall. Let me transition real quick to a couple of things we've got coming here at First Baptist Douglas. You can find some information on our Facebook page, as well as our website has got it all laid out for you, just as so you can see it there. But let me just remind you of a couple things. September 13th, we are back. We are cleaning everything. This is a safe place. We're still going to practice social distancing. I would encourage you to wear masks, not required, but I would encourage you to. Your staff, as long as they're not on the platform, obviously leading in worship through song and preaching, they'll have their mask on. I'll have mine on. We will have greeters out. We've had greeters that I'm so thankful for the past couple of months or so out in front of the church, and that has been a delight. And we've got so many favorable comments. It feels good to come to the church and be greeted. We're expanding that ministry. We're going to have greeters out on September 13th. Our first service will be at 8:30. Then Sunday school at 9:45. And at that 9:45 hour, our senior adults will be in the FMC. Our median adults will be in the chapel, and our young adults will be in the social hall. Now, you may say, well, listen, I'm not sure which group I'm in. We're going to have that published for you. We're going to have that for you. And if you don't know which group, you may be on the bubble of one of those age groups. But we're going to have that published for you, and we'll get that out to you hopefully this coming week, real soon in the next day or so. And then, and let me tell you, each one of those groups, our senior adults, the median, and the young adults, they already have leaders in place. We've kind of gone back to a division director kind of mentality during this short time. We don't know how long we'll be in this phase 2 of these large groups, but the main thing that we want to do, we want to make sure we're reaching people. So I've got 3 leaders that I've picked. Mr. Tullis Allen will lead as division director of those senior adults. Dwayne Gillis will lead that median adult. And for our younger adults, Steve Wilkerson will lead that as kind of those division leaders. And here's what they're going to ask you to do. Contact your friends. Who's not with us? Who have we not seen? And we want to do everything we can to find folks that maybe we haven't seen in 5 or 6 months. So those are the leaders in those groups. Those teachers are already in play for that first week, and then it'll be worked out after that. But we've got that set up for you, ready to go. Then our second service will be at 10:45 here in the worship center. For our students, you'll go to your regular class. Preschool and children, you'll be in your regular class. There'll be a new check-in area for our preschool and children. There'll be multiple kiosk places for you to check in, so that should be of help. And then on September 14th, which is Wednesday, it will be, we will have Bible studies for men and for women. We also have a pastor study. And then we also have our children's and student activities as well, starting children at 6. You want to be a part of that. 3 great rotations, 6:15 for our students and men and women's study. And then at 6:30, as always, our pastor leads a Bible study, which you want to join that if you don't have another place, if you don't want to do the men's study or the women's study. So we are open. We want you to come. We look forward to seeing you again here at First Baptist Church in Douglas. In a few minutes, our pastor will be up and our service will begin. I want to invite you to stick with us for about 10 more minutes in our service and worship with us this morning. If you're not with us here live, if there's anything we can do for you or help you, please let us know. Thank you for joining us this morning for Sunday school, and we look forward to seeing you soon. God bless.